The storm raged with unrelenting fury, wind screaming through the skeletal trees. Rain pounded the earth in a relentless rhythm, turning dirt roads into a treacherous mess of mud and debris. Alex pulled his soaked jacket tighter around himself, his boots sinking into the sludge with every step. Ahead, a shadow loomed. A house, long abandoned, its windows shattered like jagged teeth. Thunder cracked, shaking the ground beneath him. He had to find shelter, even if just for the night. The thought of spending another hour in this storm was unbearable. But as he trudged toward the front porch, a strange feeling crept into his chest, an unshakable sense that he wasn't alone. The wooden door groaned in protest as Alex pushed it open. His flashlight beam cut through the dense darkness, revealing tattered curtains swaying in the cold wind. The air smelled of damp rot and time, the scent of a place long forgotten. Stepping inside, he kicked away broken glass, his breath misting in the frigid air. Something about this place felt wrong. He wasn't usually the type to spook easily, but tonight was different. There was an unnatural stillness here, a silence too deep, too expectant. His grip tightened around the flashlight as he took another cautious step. Then, movement, a shift in the shadows. Alex's pulse quickened. Years of training as a firefighter had honed his senses. He could tell when someone was watching. He wasn't alone in this house. He held his breath, listening. The wind howled through the broken windows, but beneath it, there, a sound. Software. Fragile. A whimper. His muscles tensed. It was faint, barely audible over the storm, but unmistakable. He knew that sound. He'd heard it too many times before. An animal, afraid, vulnerable, in need of help. He took a cautious step forward, scanning the shadows. The whimper sent a chill down Alex's spine, not from fear, but from something deeper. Grief. For a second, he was back in the burning building, smoke filling his lungs as he screamed Duke's name. His K-9 partner had been more than a dog. He had been family. And that night, Alex had lost him. He blinked, shaking off the memory. This wasn't Duke. Duke was gone. But the sound had stirred something inside him. Something he had buried. He had to see what was making that noise. The sound came again, more urgent this time. Alex swallowed hard, his throat dry. He raised the flashlight, sweeping it across the room. Dust swirled in the beam, revealing collapsed furniture and peeling wallpaper. Then, near the far corner, something shifted. A pair of eyes reflected the light, wide, terrified. Alex's breath hitched. A dog, small, frail, cowering against the broken remains of an old cabinet. His heart clenched. He knew that fear. He had seen it before. Slowly, he crouched down, extending his hand. "Hey there, buddy. It's okay, I won't hurt you." The dog didn't move, and Alex knew. This was just the beginning. Alex froze. The whimper was faint but unmistakable. Somewhere in the ruined house, something was in distress. His pulse quickened, breath shallow as he strained to listen past the howling wind and the creaking of the rotted floorboards. Another whimper, this time sharper, edged with pain. He stepped forward cautiously, his flashlight sweeping the shadows. The air was thick with dampness, decay, and something else. Something raw, like fear itself. His firefighter instincts kicked in. Someone, or something, needed help. "Hello?" His voice was low, measured. No response. Just another whimper, growing more desperate. Alex moved carefully, stepping over broken wood and shattered glass. His light cut through the darkness, illuminating the wreckage. Then, movement. A pair of wide, frightened eyes flashed in the beam. He inhaled sharply. A German shepherd, skin stretched too tight over its ribs, lay trapped beneath fallen debris. Its chest rose and fell in short, uneven breaths. "Damn," Alex muttered under his breath. The dog barely moved, but its eyes tracked him with desperate intensity. He could see the exhaustion in them, the silent plea beneath the fear. As Alex took another step closer, the dog let out a weak, trembling growl, more warning than threat. It tried to press itself deeper into the wreckage, but there was nowhere left to go. "I'm not here to hurt you," Alex murmured, keeping his voice steady. The dog's ears flicked back, muscles coiled in what little strength it had left. It wasn't just scared, it was fighting a battle between survival and distrust. Alex knew that look. He had seen it before. His gaze fell to the dog's neck. A torn collar dangled loosely from its matted fur, the leather frayed and barely holding together. It had once belonged to someone who had either abandoned it or left it behind to fend for itself. Alex exhaled, a sharp pang twisting in his chest. How long had it been alone? How many nights had it spent shivering in the cold, waiting for someone who never came back? The answer didn't matter. What mattered was the here and now. His fingers curled into fists. Memories of Duke crashed over him like a tidal wave. His canine partner, his best friend, lost in the fire that still haunted his nightmares. He had sworn never to get attached again. Losing Duke had nearly broken him. But now, faced with this helpless, starving animal, his own rules felt like chains. He could walk away, pretend he hadn't seen those desperate eyes. Or he could do what he had always done. His jaw tightened. There was no choice. Alex slowly knelt, extending a steady hand, palm up. "Easy, buddy." The dog flinched, breath hitching. Its eyes darted between him and the wreckage, weighing escape against surrender. Alex stayed still, patience carved into his bones. He knew this game well. It wasn't about force, it was about trust. For a moment, neither of them moved. Just two souls, battered and bruised, caught in a silent battle of will. A distant rumble of thunder made Alex's decision for him. He exhaled, pushing aside his hesitation. This wasn't about him. Bracing his legs, he gripped the fallen debris. With a grunt, he heaved, muscles burning as he lifted the weight trapping the dog. The wood groaned, shifting just enough for the animal to move. The shepherd's body tensed. It had the chance to run. Any second now, it would decide. Alex held his breath. The dog didn't bolt, not yet, its ribs still heaved, body rigid with uncertainty. It watched him, muscles taut, ready to flee if he made the wrong move. Alex slowly lowered himself, keeping his posture open, non-threatening. "You're free now," he murmured. "Your call." The shepherd's ears flicked forward, legs trembling beneath it. Survival told it to run. But something deeper, a quiet, fragile thread of trust, made it hesitate. Alex didn't push, he just waited. Then lightning flashed through the broken windows. For the first time, Alex noticed the deep claw marks slashed across the walls. His breath caught. Those weren't from the dog. They were too large, too jagged. Slowly, he swept his flashlight across the room. His pulse hammered as shadows stretched unnaturally along the peeling walls. He wasn't just saving the dog. He wasn't alone. The shepherd's ears pinned back, a low, warning growl rumbling from its chest. Something else was here, and it was watching them. The wind howled through the broken windows, rattling loose shards of glass. The storm outside had turned into a blinding blizzard, making escape impossible. Inside the abandoned house, Alex sat near the fireplace, rubbing his arms for warmth, his breath forming misty clouds in the freezing air. The dog lay curled up a few feet away, its body trembling. Every few minutes it lifted its head, ears twitching at the howling wind. Alex glanced at the wrecked door, knowing they had no choice but to wait out the storm together. He exhaled sharply. "Guess it's just you and me for the night," he muttered, casting a cautious glance at the wary animal beside him. His stomach ached from hunger, but he ignored it, reaching into his pocket. His fingers closed around a crumpled protein bar, the last bit of food he had left. Slowly, he unwrapped it, breaking a small piece before extending his hand toward the dog. "Here," he said gently. "You need this more than I do." The dog sniffed at the offering, its nose twitching, but it didn't take a bite. Instead, it withdrew slightly, eyes never leaving his hand. Alex sighed, placing the piece on the floor between them. The animal was starving, but its fear was stronger than its hunger. The animal was starving, but its fear was stronger than its hunger. "Suit yourself," he murmured, leaning back against the cold wall. Minutes passed. The storm roared on. Alex's fingers felt numb, his soaked jacket clinging to his skin. With a grunt, he shrugged it off and hesitated before carefully draping it over the shivering dog. The dog flinched at the contact, its muscles tensing, but it didn't bolt. It remained still, watching him with guarded eyes. "That's all I got," Alex muttered. "No sudden moves, all right?" The warmth of the jacket seemed to calm the animal, its trembling lessening. For the first time, it didn't look at him with pure distrust. A small step, but a step nonetheless. As the night dragged on, silence settled between them, save for the occasional crack of thunder. Alex stared at the flickering fire, memories surfacing against his will. "You remind me of him," he murmured. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Duke, my partner." The dog's ears perked slightly. "He was the best search and rescue dog I ever had," Alex continued. His throat tightened. "I should have saved him. That fire, it wasn't supposed to end like that." He let out a heavy breath, raking a hand through his damp hair. "I told myself I wouldn't get attached again. But here I am," his gaze met the dog's. "And here you are." The animal didn't move, but something in its eyes softened. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, hesitantly, the dog inched forward. It was cautious, testing the waters, but it didn't retreat this time. Alex barely breathed as the animal closed the distance. Then, in a quiet act of trust, the dog rested its head against his leg. The touch was light, fleeting, but it sent a rush of warmth through him, one that had nothing to do with the fire. Alex let out a shaky breath, his hand hovering before he gently stroked the matted fur. "Yeah," he whispered, "I get it." A moment of understanding, a silent promise. Then a noise, a creak, slow, deliberate. Alex stiffened. The dog's head shot up, ears alert. The sound had come from above. His pulse quickened. The storm had masked a lot of noises, but this one wasn't the wind. Another creak, followed by a faint rhythmic scratching. The dog let out a low whine, pressing closer to Alex's side. His muscles tensed. He swallowed hard, glancing at the ceiling. His firefighter instincts kicked in, assessing every possible explanation. Loose wood? Rats? A draft? But deep down, he already knew. They weren't alone in this house. Slowly, Alex rose to his feet. The dog followed suit, muscles coiled, every hair on its body standing on end. His eyes scanned the room. That's when he saw them. Old, yellowed newspaper clippings scattered on the floor. Some torn, others stained with something dark. Frowning, he crouched, picking one up. His breath caught in his throat. Missing. Local hiker. Vanishes near abandoned property. Another headline. Police search for fourth disappearance this year. Alex's grip tightened around the fragile paper. The stories were all the same. People lost, never found. And the last known location? This house. His stomach turned. Then, a growl, deep, warning. The dog's posture shifted. It stood rigid, hackles raised, staring at the dark hallway beyond the room. A growl rumbled from its throat, low, guttural, primal. Alex's breath hitched. He followed its gaze, his body going rigid. A shadow flickered just beyond the firelight's reach. Then, a faint, wet sound, like breathing, too deep, too unnatural. Alex's heart pounded. The dog's stance tightened, a silent warning that sent a chill down his spine. They weren't just trapped by the storm. Something else was here, and it was watching them. The dog's sudden movement was a blur. One moment Alex stood frozen, staring at the attic door, and the next he was slammed onto the cold wooden floor. His breath hitched as the weight of the dog pressed into his chest. Before he could process what had happened, a deafening crack echoed above. A section of the ceiling gave way, sending a shower of rotting wood and dust cascading down onto the exact spot where he had been standing. Alex coughed violently, heart hammering as he turned his gaze upward. If the dog hadn't knocked him down, that debris would have crushed him. The realization sent a chill racing down his spine. The dog hadn't attacked him. It had saved his life. Lying on the floor, Alex struggled to catch his breath. His hands trembled as he wiped a layer of dust from his face, his pulse still pounding in his ears. The jagged remains of the collapsed ceiling loomed above him, a harsh reminder of how close he had come to disaster. His eyes flicked to the dog, its chest rising and falling rapidly, ears perked and eyes locked on the attic door. It wasn't looking at him, it was looking at whatever was behind that door. The scratching above had stopped, but the silence was even more unsettling. The dog let out a low, guttural growl, its body rigid with tension. Its gaze never wavered from the attic door. The scratching resumed, more frantic now, long, clawing strokes against the wood, as if something trapped inside was growing desperate. Alex swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at him to get out of this house, to take the dog and run. But something held him in place. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was something darker, a need to understand what horror lay just beyond that door. Either way, he knew he couldn't turn back now. Alex exhaled slowly, forcing himself to steady his shaking hands. He reached for the rusted flashlight sitting on the old dresser, its weight cold and reassuring in his grip. The dog's eyes flicked to him, then back to the door, as if gauging his resolve. "We have to know," Alex murmured, though whether he was convincing the dog or himself he wasn't sure. With slow, deliberate steps, he moved toward the attic. The dog followed, close enough that Alex could feel its warmth. Whatever was up there, they would face it together. Alex reached the attic door, its peeling paint curling at the edges. His fingers hesitated on the rusted handle. A deep breath. Then he pushed. The door groaned as it creaked open, revealing a thick, oppressive darkness. A wave of putrid air rushed out, so foul and thick that Alex gagged. The dog flinched, but didn't back away. The beam of the flashlight trembled as he aimed it inside. Shadows stretched long and distorted against the wooden beams. But it wasn't the shadows that made his blood run cold. It was what lay beneath them. Chains dangled from the walls, their rusted links swaying gently as if disturbed by an unseen force. Bones scattered across the attic floor, some large, others heartbreakingly small. Fragments of skulls, rib cages, and splintered femurs, all long stripped of flesh. The wooden beams bore deep claw marks, desperate and wild. as if someone, or something, had tried to claw their way out. Alex's stomach churned. The flashlight flickered as his grip tightened. This wasn't just an abandoned house, it was a prison. A chill swept through Alex's body, deeper than the cold of the storm outside. His mind raced, trying to piece it together. Has someone been keeping people here? Animals? Both the chains, the bones, the desperate claw marks. His breath hitched as a sickening thought clawed into his mind. Was someone still here? A rustling sound. Alex stiffened. The dog's growl deepened, its fur bristling. A breath, soft, ragged, not his own. His pulse thundered in his ears as he swung the flashlight wildly across the attic. The beam caught movement in the farthest corner, just for a second. A shifting mass, a shadow that didn't belong. Then it lunged. The dog exploded forward, snarling, a flash of teeth and muscle as it intercepted the figure. A guttural cry echoed through the attic as the two clashed, the dog's barks deafening in the small space. Alex stumbled back, heart racing as he fumbled for something, anything to use as a weapon. The flashlight beam caught a glimpse of a face, wild eyes, matted hair, a figure wrapped in tattered rags, moving with an unnatural speed. Not a ghost, not a monster. A man who had been living here. The hermit lunged at Alex, his fingers curled into claws. Alex barely dodged, crashing into an old wooden beam. The dog didn't hesitate. It leaped again, sinking its teeth into the man's arm. The hermit let out a furious shriek, thrashing wildly. Alex scrambled to his feet, grabbing a broken plank from the floor. He swung it with all his strength. The impact sent the hermit staggering. The dog didn't relent, snapping at his legs, forcing him further back. The attic trembled with their struggle, dust raining down, the walls groaning under the force. Then, with a final, desperate shove, Alex sent the hermit crashing to the floor. Pinned beneath Alex's weight, the hermit's wild eyes darted around the attic, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His lips curled into something between a snarl and a grin. "You shouldn't have come here," he rasped. Alex tightened his grip. "Who are you? What have you done?" The hermit only laughed, a dry, rattling sound. His fingers twitched as if reaching for something unseen. The dog stood over them both, chest heaving, lips pulled back in a silent warning. For the first time, the hermit's grin faltered. The fight was over. The hermit lay still, subdued beneath Alex's weight. The house, once filled with eerie sounds, had fallen into a deathly silence, but its secrets still lingered in the air, thick and heavy. Alex slowly turned to the dog, its fur matted with blood, not its own, but proof of its loyalty. He reached out, running a shaking hand over its head. "You saved my life," he whispered. The dog nudged his palm, silent but unwavering. They weren't alone anymore. Alex sat against the cold wooden floor, his breath ragged, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Sirens howled in the distance, flashing red and blue lights illuminating the shattered remnants of his nightmare. The weight of what had just transpired pressed down on him like a heavy fog. He had come face to face with something far worse than ghosts. His fingers trembled as he reached out, feeling the warmth of thick fur beneath his palm. Max sat beside him, eyes sharp yet steady, his body still tense from the battle. The nightmare was over, but the scars remained. The attic, once a hidden tomb of horrors, now stood exposed under the harsh glare of police flashlights. Officers moved cautiously, piecing together a grotesque puzzle from the remains scattered across the floor. A detective knelt beside a rusted chain, his expression grim as he lifted a tattered piece of cloth, evidence of lives lost and forgotten. These match some of the missing person reports from over a decade ago, an officer muttered. Alex swallowed hard, his chest tightening. This house had never been haunted by spirits. The real horror had always been human. Max remained glued to Alex's side, his deep brown eyes scanning the room, ever watchful. His body trembled slightly from exhaustion, but he didn't move. Not when paramedics checked Alex's bruises, not when officers questioned him, not even when the house emptied out. It was as if he understood his duty wasn't over yet. He wasn't just a dog that had saved Alex's life. He was his protector, his shadow, his unwavering guardian in the face of darkness. One of the officers knelt beside Max, gently brushing the dirt from his fur before pulling back his tattered collar. A metal tag, rusted and worn, reflected in the dim light. Max, the officer read aloud. His name is Max. The moment the name left the officer's lips, something shifted inside Alex. He repeated it under his breath, his fingers tightening around Max's fur. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was something deeper, something unspoken. It was fate. Alex stared at Max, realization sinking in. This dog hadn't just stumbled into his life by chance. He had been led here, guided by something beyond explanation. Max wasn't just another stray. He was a force of destiny, pulling Alex back from the edge of loneliness and despair. He had come searching for answers, for closure. Instead, he had found something far greater. Max had saved him in more ways than one. An officer crouched down, offering Max a gentle pat. "He's a hero," the man said with a small smile. "We can take him to a shelter, make sure he finds a good home." But Max didn't move. Instead, he pressed his head firmly against Alex's leg, his silent choice clear. Alex swallowed the lump in his throat, his hand resting against Max's back. "He already has one," Alex murmured. Max had chosen him, and this time Alex wasn't letting go. As dawn painted the sky in shades of gold, Alex and Max stepped away from the house that had held so many nightmares. For years, Alex had believed he was cursed, bound to darkness. But now, with Max beside him, he saw the truth. He hadn't been cursed, he had been waiting for the moment he would find something worth fighting for. And in the depths of fear and shadow he had found it. A new beginning, a second chance, a bond that could never be broken. As Alex sat on his apartment floor, Max curled up beside him. He exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His life had taken a turn he never expected, yet somehow it felt right. Second chances didn't always arrive wrapped in clarity. Sometimes they came in the form of a scared dog with unwavering eyes, waiting to be trusted. Max had taught Alex what no one else could. Trust wasn't something given freely. It was earned, built brick by brick, moment by moment. They had both been afraid, carrying wounds too deep to be seen. But together, step by step, they had learned to move forward, to lean on one another. For the first time in years, Alex didn't feel alone. Not in the hollow way he used to, where silence felt like an enemy. Now, that silence was filled with steady breathing, with the quiet weight of something unwavering. Max had stayed. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And that meant everything. Survival had been Alex's only goal for so long, existing, getting through the days. But Max had reminded him of something greater. Love wasn't weakness, it was strength. The kind that healed. The kind that reached past fear and whispered, "You are not alone." As Alex grabbed his jacket, Max stood, ears perked, as if he already knew. Alex looked down at him and smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't in years. "Let's go home," he whispered. And for the first time, it wasn't just a place, it was a feeling, one they had found in each other.